On the night of March 21st, 2010, Paulette Guevara, her sister, and her father returned from their vacation and went into the apartment complex. The girl's mother, Lisette Farah, greeted them upon their arrival. She changed Paulette into her pajamas, tucked her into bed, and shut off the lights. The night passed like any other night. In the morning, one of the two nannies came to wake the girls up for school. However, she noticed that one of them was missing, Paulette. Around 8 a.m., she alerted the mother, and the two began searching the house. When they couldn't find her, they started searching the whole apartment complex, but to no avail. Paulette's father reported the missing girl to the authorities, which then reached the mayor of the town, who then subsequently notified the Attorney General's office of the state of Mexico. After a whole day of searching, Paulette still hadn't been found. Everyone had searched all corners of the apartment and the outside. What's even more strange, there weren't any signs of kidnapping. The sheets were intact, the windows were fine, and the locks were all there. Could Paulette have left the apartment on her own? Well, that's not likely, as there were guards stationed outside and surveillance cameras. On top of that, Paulette had a motor and language disability from being born prematurely, making it unlikely that she left by herself. She moves very slowly, with a limp, and can't move one of her hands that well. The day ended, still with no signs of Paulette. Two days had passed, and people were starting to become very worried around the area. With no other options left, the Attorney General's office of the state of Mexico released a poster with a photo of the missing girl, reading, "My name is Paulette. I am 4 years old. I have a motor and language disability. I have a scar on the right side of my back. I have no way to fend for myself. I need my parents." Paulette's aunt, Arlette Farah, sent emails and uploaded photos of the girl to social media. It was for that reason that the news of the missing girl spread like wildfire. People hearing the story of Paulette and concerns for her safety unleashed a massive search, and within a couple of days, the story reached national attention, touching the hearts of many families across Mexico, and even garnering attention from many news outlets who wanted to sit down with Lisette, the girl's mother, and interview her. In these interviews, we can see Paulette's mother explain her daughter's condition and the events prior to the disappearance as she sat on the girl's bed, as it was the last memory she had of her daughter. One week after Paulette's disappearance, her parents and the two sister nannies would be arrested by state officials. According to Attorney General Alberto Basbas, each of them at a certain point has falsified their statement, which has made it difficult to know the truth of the facts and clarify a firm line of investigation. They would spend some time at the Mexican Attorney General's office until the next day on the 30th, where they were transferred to a hotel where they would serve until further notice. During this, Paulette's father, Mauricio Guevara, was interrogated by police and is said to have stated, "Yes, I know where Paulette is, and I'll tell you everything only if you help me, because I don't want to get into any trouble with the law. I'm scared of going to jail. I'm desperate." That very same day, experts from the forensic agency placed blankets at the home for a reconstruction of the events. Authorities did not notice anything amiss in the room until they detected a faint odor of a decomposing body. As they looked around, they found two very large bloodstains on the blanket and sheets of the bed. And around 2 a.m. on Wednesday, March 31st, the body of Paulette was found, lifeless in her own bedroom, wrapped in sheets, lodged in between her mattress and the foot of the bed. The same bed they sat on during the interviews. General Attorney Basbas ruled her death an accident, due to mechanical asphyxia, due to obstruction of the nasal cavities and thorax abdominal compression. The autopsy report revealed no suspicious findings, her body was not manipulated after death. No drugs or toxic substances were found, and the official statement was that there were no signs of physical or sexual violence. However, you can't ignore the signs of a physical blow on the left elbow and knee. And in the forensics video, upon uncovering the body, one expert declares that the girl was severely beaten. Despite that, it was declared that Paulette, by her own means, moved towards the foot of the bed and accidentally fell into a tight space, where she suffocated and remained for 9 days. The parents, as well as the 2 nannies, were released on April 4th, leaving the hotel room in different times. In separate interviews, Lizette and her husband engaged in verbal accusations. Lizette claimed that her husband blamed her for Paulette's death, saying that it could not have been an accident. But how likely is that? For Paulette to roll over from her normal sleeping position all the way to the foot of the bed, while not impossible for a girl with her condition, it doesn't help that argument. Furthermore, pillows were placed around Paulette to keep her from rolling around too much. And if we were to assume that she managed to get past the pillows and roll down to the tight space, we could also infer that there would be some evidence of her doing so. The sheets, blankets, and duvet would follow her down, leaving some sort of mark. But according to nanny Martha Casimiro, I looked in the bathroom, under the bed, and in the closet. I saw that she was not there, and I also went to the bedroom of the parents to look for her, to the bedroom of the other girl, and from there we started to look for her again, and I went back to look for her in the bedroom. And her sister, Erica, stating, "In fact, if it had been like that, I think we would have noticed. Since thousands of people came to look for her, the bed was made. I never saw the mattress pulled back. I did not see a bundle or anything. It does not make sense to me that the body could have been there since Monday." If we were to amplify this even further, a close friend of Farah, Amanda de la Rosa, was staying in the apartment for several days immediately after Paulette's disappearance. Even weirder, she slept in Paulette's room. During the time she stayed there, the bed was made daily. Now, I don't know about you, but when I make my bed, I take off everything, and even allow my mattress if it's out of place. How nobody noticed Paulette lying there, and even more obvious, the 2 large bloodstains on the sheets, I don't know. Journalist Lily Tellez, who did an interview with Farah on top of Paulette's bed, recalled this years later. "I was on that bed when Paulette had been dead for 5 days. I checked the bed, touched her blankets, helped fix the bedspread to do the interview. But neither she nor the team noticed any smell, nor any signs of an odd room temperature. There was no freezing temperature in that room that would prevent the body, which had been decomposing for 5 days, from giving off that smell of death." And what I didn't mention earlier was that the search team used trained rescue dogs, who would easily be able to smell Paulette, but they didn't. The only other explanation is that she was placed there. But who would do such a thing? The main suspect is Paulette's own mother, Lizette Farah. She was the last one to see Paulette after all. During the investigation of the case, a recording between Paulette's mother, Lizette, and her then 7-year-old sister, also named Lizette, was released, in which she tells her daughter not to say anything of Paulette's disappearance, so that they would not be blamed, with the following words. Little Lizette asks, "Why, Mom?" And she replies, "Because otherwise they will blame us for stealing her, or that you took her away to be stolen." At first, Farah denied this, saying that it was edited, but later accepted that she said these words, but taken out of context. Most people believe that Lizette, and maybe even her husband and her nannies, didn't want to take the burden of taking care of a disabled girl. So with them being rich, they used their influence and money to pay off investigators and ultimately come out innocent. The case of Paulette is a sad one. Whether you believe it was an accident or not, you can't deny. Seeing the interviews, knowing that she was either killed by one of her family or was right under them the whole time, is incredibly sad. And this story will end up being one of the darkest moments in all of Mexican TV. On the afternoon of Tuesday, November 23, 2004, Sub-Inspector Victor Mireles, Warrant Officer Cristobal Bonilla, and Warrant Officer Edgar Moreno, dressed in civilian clothes and in a gray Focus car, were carrying out federal intelligence work in the Peña Alta neighborhood of the town of San Juan Ixtayopan. They were sent there to investigate a house that was supposedly selling drugs. They were looking at the house when they spotted a woman with a tray in her hand. So Victor Mireles took a photo of the lady and they left. Around 5 to 6 p.m., that same woman was spotted by an elementary school nearby. So Victor told Edgar Moreno to leave the car and see what the name of the school was called. Edgar, feeling uneasy, told Victor that they were about to leave and that they'll come back tomorrow to investigate further. But Victor, being a higher rank of the federal police, told Edgar to step out of the car and do it. When Edgar arrived at the corner of the school, a small group of people started to show up, and some fathers approached Edgar. They asked him who he was. Edgar replied, "Why?" "Because we don't recognize you. You're not from around here. I only came to buy some juice." Edgar Moreno kept walking when one of the men grabbed him by the arm and accused them of being kidnappers. At that moment, more people kept arriving, when a couple of aggressors started to initiate the conflict further by telling everyone of the fake news. They pushed Edgar against the wall, tied his hands together with rope, and asked him again who he was. He finally told them that they were the federal police, and if they would give him the opportunity, he would identify himself. Now, hearing those words, you would think they would allow him to prove to them that he was there on a mission, but they didn't let him. And they started searching his pockets, when they found several ID cards proving he was a federal officer. Edgar's partners were forcibly removed from the car, and the three of them were pushed against the vehicle and beaten by the large mob that had gathered. They had taken everything out of them, including the camera and their handguns. A patrol nearby saw what was going on, and they tried to calm down the crowd, but due to the sheer amount of people, they were overwhelmed and it was deemed impossible to save them. After some time, the crowd had calmed down, and Edgar managed to free his hand and told everyone, "I will show you we are honest people. Let me call my boss from the federal police."
Habla con tu jefe, decías de la policía federal.
Nos están golpeando, señor, y porque o sea, la gente de aquí se empezó a decir que supuestamente veníamos para ayudarnos unas niñas y todo, pero no, ya les dijimos que venimos a lo del narcomenudeo, pero no nos quieren creer. Estamos investigando narcomenudeo.
Es que creo que ya la regamos.
Es el mío, señor. Edgar Moreno.
Mejor deja que la suya.
After several more beatings, Edgar makes 2 more calls to his co-workers, but after the third, the mob takes the phone and starts making threats. At this point, the 3 of them were on the floor, still being hit, even with baseball bats, when Cristobal Bonilla seemed to limp. He was either unconscious or dead. Edgar and Victor grabbed each other's hands, when Edgar was dragged to a lamppost and further assaulted. At one point, as Edgar was shirtless and about to be stoned, he felt a hand on his shoulder. It was the police and paramedics. They managed to get through everyone, and they took Edgar to the hospital. Along the way, he pleaded multiple times to the paramedics to save his partners. However, it was already too late. Around 9 p.m., Victor Mireles and Cristobal Bonilla were left motionless in the middle of the street, only to be set on fire with gasoline. A day later, Operation Cyclone would commence. More than 300 agents of the Federal Investigation Agency besieged the Jaime Torre neighborhood and the Peña Alta neighborhood. As if the night prior wasn't bad enough, without search or arrest warrants, AFI agents entered homes and stopped any vehicle who crossed their path. The suspects were identified by photographs that the surviving officer, Edgar, pointed out, even though he was in a coma from which he emerged a month later. Despite the state in which he was, Edgar narrated how the events took place and identified some of his aggressors. However, it seemed like this case had many inconsistencies, like the testimony of two minors, who allegedly identified many aggressors, despite the fact that they were more than 530 feet away, and almost in complete darkness. The operation ended with 35 people arrested, 4 of them as witnesses, who were accused of double homicide, attempted homicide, damage to other people's property, damage to the nation, gang activity, and guerrilla warfare. Among the arrests is Richardson Santo Lopez, who returned from a trip on the day of Operation Cyclone. He presented a plane ticket at the defense and was still imprisoned for 4 years and 5 months. There is also that of Adan Rafael Cayetano. He lived in a different city, and on November 24th, he went to the Jaime Torre Boder neighborhood to work as a bricklayer. He was not there on the night of the lynching. There was also Martin Andres Garcia and Edgar Molotla, who died in 2008 and 2009 inside prison. The prison authorities did not inform the families of the causes, but according to many testimonies, they were beaten repeatedly on the day of their arrest, so much that they received a brain infection. The whole event was recorded by Televisa, airing live on TV. While most of the footage isn't available, what we do have only shows a small fraction of the brutality that went on that night, and some moments I couldn't even mention. The story was told in detail by the sole survivor, Edgar Moreno. And November 23rd, 2004, is known as the Night of Tlahuac, the night 3 innocent people were falsely accused of kidnapping, and the night 2 innocent lives were lost. Fuel theft isn't uncommon in Mexico. The state oil company, Pemex, has been dealing with thieves and organized crime groups since the 2010s. It is believed to be so profitable for the thieves that it became their main source of revenue, especially with the rise in fuel prices internationally. And it isn't just a problem with thieves, it's also an internal problem as well, as it's believed that bribery and corruption within the government and Pemex help out these groups. Fuel theft in any way in Mexico is punishable by up to 20 years in prison. That doesn't seem to deter thieves, however, because it's been known that the supply of illegal fuel has been sustaining entire communities in many states. The stolen gasoline is often sold at a discounted price to low-income communities. As a result of the increase in fuel theft, around $3 billion is spent every year on damages, not only on repairs, but for compensation to the intended buyers. To deal with this, in 2018, a campaign was launched to deal with gasoline theft. Around 5,000 troops from the armed forces were ordered to guard pipelines all across Mexico. And it seemed to work a little too well. Because of this, many communities that were using stolen fuel as their main source suddenly had no fuel. So they used the alternative, legal fuel, which caused a shortage of gasoline and long lines at gas stations. And on January 18th, 2019, sometime around 5 p.m., there were reports of residents collecting fuel from a pipeline in Tlahualalipan. And these weren't secretive reports either. It was circulating throughout social media. And in these videos, you could see local residents carrying buckets, jerry cans, and water bottles swarming around a large gas fountain coming from a rupture in a pipeline. This pipeline was one of the country's main fuel pipelines. And it seemed like hundreds, if not maybe even 1,000 people were rejoicing from the free fuel. Witness accounts were saying that there were women, children, and teenagers who were having fun, jumping around, and jokingly throwing gasoline at each other. Around 25 armed troops arrived on the scene, but it wasn't enough to turn back the 600 to 800 residents who had surrounded the pipe. They actually tried persuading people to not enter the zone, but people lashed out very aggressively. On top of that, they were told to not engage with any thieves initially, fearing a shootout would break, which might hurt someone, or ignite the gasoline, or that the soldiers would be killed by an angry mob. And we already know how that goes. At 5:04 p.m., the leak was reported to 911. When first informed of the leak, Pemex did not close the valve because they didn't consider the rupture important.
Mira, no juegues.
Están otros dos lodos por incendio. Ahorita la primera que llegue aquí a mi voz la mando para allá. Más acá adelante de acabar esta otra.
At 7:10 p.m., after about 2 hours of the leak being reported, there was an explosion. The entire surrounding area, including the air, ground, and people, were set on fire. Reports of people burning to bones or even ash were made, with some people's skin peeling right off, and many shouting the names of their family members. And news stations captured the horrors of the scene. In these broadcasts, you could see people running, standing in shock, and laying on the floor, horribly burned, for everyone at home to see. The fire was extinguished 4 hours later. But what would cause such a huge explosion? Well, nobody knows. But it's believed that with the high amount of octane in the air, and with so many people moving around, the synthetic material of their clothes generated a spark which caused the explosion. The mayor of the town believed people acted out of necessity. With many pipelines being shut down and the decline in stolen fuel theft, they had no choice. In the aftermath of the explosion, public outrage surged. Families mourned their loved ones, demanding justice. Protests erupted, urging authorities to take decisive action. Questions arose about Pemex's negligence and their poor security measures. This incident would unfortunately reveal the need for all of these. The Tlahualilipan pipeline explosion is an important lesson for all parties involved. And seeing the videos of not only the people affected by the burns, but also looking for their family members, not knowing if they're alive, is something you wouldn't want to see on a regular day. On May 6, 2002, around 100 children were gathered outside on the street. The children, along with their teachers, had taken to the streets due to the lack of space in the facilities of their kindergarten. They had music, signs, and plenty of room. However, there was a man behind them, inside a blue van. He had left his home and had usually taken this road to go to work. But it was blocked by the kids. He tried to pass on the side of the road multiple times, but was unable to do so. They just looked back at him in silence, not wanting to pay any attention to him. He got out of his car and shouted some warning to the teachers. So he backed out and drove forward. But again, they simply looked back and ignored him completely. Once more, the man drove back, and it looked like he was leaving. The children at this point were singing, but they weren't able to finish the song, as they were hit with the blue truck. The video recorded was broadcasted by many news stations like Televisa, and confirmed that around 22 people were injured, and a 5- and 3-year-old had lost their lives. The man responsible for the incident, Jose Avila, was arrested shortly after crashing his truck into the protesters. He tried to flee, but was detained by parents. hundreds of people stood outside of his house after the event, with the intent to lynch him. Apparently, this conflict had been going on for 3 years. The school had used the street many times for activities and would request the use of the street with a judge. The mechanic would make multiple threats to the school, and for 5 months, the mayor of the city had been asked many times to provide protection to the minors who attended the school. In a previous encounter, Jose threw a vehicle he was fixing towards the children, but only to scare them away. In an interview, he said, "I ran them over because I'm gone. I'm desperate. I'm a desperate person." But he wished that he had killed the principal, stating that she exposed the kids to danger and deserved to die. He apologized for the death of the children, but he never repented for the injuries caused to the adults. He's currently serving a 50-year sentence, but that will never bring back the 2 innocent children that were lost that day. And this would be a very unfortunate day that could have easily been prevented, but now stands as one of the darkest moments in Mexican TV. And thank you to everyone for watching. I'm glad to make a part 2 to a video you guys loved so much, and I'll be here for many more. Hopefully you learned something from this video, but with that, I'll see you guys later.